Please stand to welcome the presiding member, Mayor Emma Cole.
Good evening, everyone. I declare the meeting open at 6:03, and on behalf of the City of Vincent, I pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the members of the public gallery this evening. I'd just like to let you know that we do web stream our meetings, but we don't stream the public question time part of proceedings, so we do ask you to give some personal information so that won't be transmitted, just so that you know. But before we get to public question time, we just need to deal with apologies of members on approved leave of absence. At this stage we have notification from Councillor Harley that she is running late and will be here at 6:15, and we're assuming also for Councillor Loden at this point. All right, so we'll move to public question time. There's no order, you're just free to come up to the microphone as you wish. We just ask that you state your name, your address and the item number to which you're speaking this evening. So please come forward, Mari. Thank you. So any applications for leave of absence received, CEO?
No, Mayor Cole, I've not received any. No.
Okay, and petitions, deputations and presentations, I believe there are nil. Yes. Confirmation of minutes. We are dealing with the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the 14th of November 2017. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes? Move Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Loden. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Announcements by the presiding member. I do have a couple of announcements. We had some incredibly exciting news last Thursday that we finally have a ministerial decision on our on our local planning scheme too. This has been an absolute long road to get here, and we're absolutely thrilled to have this decision. It's progress, and we couldn't be happier about it. The decision does bring much needed clarity on the future of the concrete batching plants, which was probably one of the central issues that was holding up the passage of our local planning scheme. And the City of Vincent's proposed mixed use at R160 zoning over the two concrete batching plants has been determined by the Minister, and that was what we wanted at the City of Vincent. So we are very welcoming and supportive of this announcement. It is a fundamentally different decision to any that's come before on the future of the concrete batching plants, where we did see rolling 5-year approvals and no line in the sand. This actually is an immediate R160 mixed-use zoning, and with an additional use of special industries, which has been allowed for 6.5 years, but at the end of that time it becomes a prohibited use or an ex-use in our new scheme. So that is the end, and that is the line in the sand that we've been asking for. It hasn't come as soon and as quickly as many of us would have wanted, but I think that we are happy that we finally have the state government on board with our future vision for Claysbrook, and I note that it has been quite well received in the Claysbrook community. So there obviously will be some landowners and businesses that would like to see that happen sooner and will be a little disappointed, but I think the central issue is that we finally have a future vision for a transit-orientated hub in Claysbrook and all that that will bring. There are some other changes in our scheme, and that one did dominate, but our development services team are working through the ministerial decision, and that they will form a full understanding of all of the changes so that they can advise community and council as soon as possible. Just also to note that it is festive time. Vincent is alive with festive events and Christmas spirit at the moment. There's been a lot of things happening. This past weekend there were carols at Kyla Primary School, the Beaufort Street Twilight Christmas Market, street Christmas parties are happening throughout our neighbourhoods, and Mount Hawthorn Community Christmas carols were taking place in Braithwaite Park. It is important because I think these festive traditions do bring together neighbours, friends and family. They help us to connect and to take some time out at what can be a very hectic time in our December schedules. And also just wanted to note that this year the City of Vincent will be shining a light on our volunteers within the City of Vincent community by celebrating 12 Christmas heroes. They will be volunteers who contribute so much to life in Vincent, coming from all sorts of different groups in Vincent, such as our town teams, our sporting clubs and numerous other community groups that do a lot of great work throughout the year. So keep track of social media to see some of these people celebrated throughout Christmas. I now take declarations of interest from the CEO.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I have two. The first is from Councillor Josh Toppelberg. It's a disclosure of proximity interest in planning item 9.6, Fitzgerald Street, Perth. The extent of Councillor Toppelberg's interest is that his family owns a property directly opposite the proposed development at 301 Fitzgerald Street. Councillor Toppelberg is not seeking approval to participate in the debate or to remain in chambers or vote on the matter when it is discussed. The second disclosure of impartiality, or the second disclosure, is a disclosure of impartiality interest from myself, Len Kosova, CEO, in respect of item 13.1, Audit Committee Minutes and Annual Financial Report for 2016-17. The nature of my interest is that I am acquainted with Mr Sean Williams, an auditor who works at Moore Stephens, the city's external auditor. Mr Williams does not work in the local government division of Moore Stephens and has been expressly prohibited from having any involvement in audit functions for the City of Vincent by the contract entered into between the City and Moore Stephens for external audit services. For the purpose of consistency and transparency, though, I'd also just note that this information was also reflected in an impartiality interest disclosure that I made to Council at its meeting on 4th of April 2017 when Council considered appointment of Moore Stephens as the City's external auditor. Sorry, Mayor Cole, I've got no further disclosures.
Thank you, CEO. That then leaves us to seek from council members whether you wish to bring forward any other reports that have not already been mentioned during public question time and that are also not already absolute majority decision required. Councillor Hallett, Councillor Castle, Councillor Harley, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Loden, Councillor Fotakis, Councillor Toppelberg.
Sorry, try again. 11.1, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toppelberg. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just item 9.1, please.
Thank you. Okay, that means that we'll be moving the remainder of the items on block. So I'll just, do you need a little bit of time to go through that, CEO? Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Council members and members of the gallery and audiences streaming elsewhere. In relation to Council standing orders, the following items Council will now consider adopting en bloc in accordance with the officer recommendations. They are item 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.7, 9.8, 10.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 11.6, 11.7, 11.8, 13.1 and 13.4. Apologies also, noting also notices of motion item 14.1 and 14.2.
That would be a record for us, I'd say. Can I have a mover for the en bloc items, please? Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Harley. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items carried. We'll now go to the reports and we'll deal with them by the order in which they were raised by the public gallery first. So the first item that was raised tonight was item 9.9, amendment to policy number 7.5.15, character retention and heritage areas. Do I have a mover for this item, please? Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. So I'll just We'll note that there's been an amendment prepared which came to us from administration late this evening, which is on the white, and it just relates to removing the word and. Removing the word and replacing it with or, which relates to the query that came from the gallery earlier. So effectively, that introduces that subjectivity to be able to assess the impact of the visibility of the second story. And whilst that 10-metre requirement, well, actually, I'll get a seconder first before we go
on. Councillor Harley.
It effectively corrects an error. In principle, it was supposed to say or as opposed to and. So that means that if you are going to have the second story visible from the street, it needs to be set back a minimum of 10 metres. Otherwise, it needs to be in accordance with Figure 2, out of the line of sight from Harley Street.
Councillor Harley, do you wish to comment?
No, thank you, ma'am.
Councillors? Look, I would just go to the Director with a question arising from the gallery this evening. The question was really around whether that would be too prescriptive in terms of the line of sight being set at 10 metres, and the example was given of Subiaco. I'm not quite sure what sort of treatment they give there, but would you like to comment in relation to that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the issue was throughout this whole process, the community and the city have been working together on these provisions, and the intent of the provisions was for either outcome to be appropriate. That was what was advertised, supported by the community, supported by the city, and so it was simply a drafting error when the amendments were made last week after the briefing session to clarify this provision. We probably over-clarified it and created an additional burden which was not intended. So either outcome is appropriate in the street. That's what the community supported, and the city thinks it's appropriate as well, and it would be consistent with the provisions that we've drafted for other areas.
Councillors, any further comment or question on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Back to the substantive.
I'll just continue.
Sure.
On the substantive. Can we just perhaps get some comments in relation to Janet Street and the issues that were raised from the gallery, if it's possible? So firstly, just some clarity around the responses from occupiers or landowners. My understanding is that the policy stipulates landowners rather than occupiers, and also some clarity around the difference between the protections afforded under a heritage area or character retention area. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Cole, at the time that the character retention area nomination was made for Janet Street, there was no ability in the policy to recognise the area as a heritage area. The city undertook some further consultation earlier this year to see whether the community was receptive to either a character or heritage area, and didn't receive support or opposition either way. And so at this point in time, it's proposed that Janet Street be recognised as a heritage area for the purpose of advertising to go to the landowners and residents affected by the change to see what their views are at this point in time on that particular designation. In terms of the difference between a character and a heritage area, the key difference is that with a heritage area designation, any demolition in the area would need to be seek the approval of the city, and so that's probably the key difference. Both heritage and character areas are the same in that they provide specific policy guidance to ensure that future development is aligned with the vision of the community, no different to any other policy provisions that the city might have. So that's the key difference.
And can we just obviously there's clearly some concern from at least one landowner and potentially others, just to get some clarity around the process. If the officer recommendation is approved as recommended, what the process would be for Janet Street residents and or owners, and what opportunity they would have to contribute, and in what format?
So through you, Mayor Cole, the city is required to advertise the policy amendment for a minimum period of 28 days in accordance with the regulations and the city's consultation policy. We'll write to all the affected landowners and residents, and also are intending to hold a community session at the street so that we can show people what the provisions are intended to preserve or enhance. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for residents and landowners to let us know what their views are on this issue, and then we can present that back to council for consideration for a final decision to be made.
Councillor Toppelberg, anything further? Councillors, any further comments? There were a couple of other issues. I just want to make sure that we got them all. Just in terms of I mean, we did discuss this at the briefing, but there was the commentary around the language that was used originally in the policy, and the fact that we've changed from design principles to local housing objectives. Director, there was a concern raised that weakened the position at the SAT, but I understand from the discussion at the briefing that you didn't feel that that was the case. Perhaps you could just talk us through that again?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The character retention area policy was given due regard by the SAT when considering the Harley Street development application, 14 Harley Street. The main issue that exists is that the state government's R codes include design principles which the city cannot amend or change. So any development that doesn't comply with the deemed to comply standards of the city's policy will be assessed against the state government's design principles, and there's no ability for the city to change that system. That's the state government's system. So ultimately, that is the way the process works, and that's what SAT has consideration for. What we've done since the SAT decision was clarify how the city's local housing objectives and the objectives for Harley Street should be used in that process. So we've redrafted those objectives to ensure that they provide clear guidance for the SAT and for the council when making decisions against the design principles. So provide a bit of guidance around what the design principles mean in the context of Harley Street. So that certainly will help future applications. I do not believe that it would have made a difference to the ultimate decision that was made for 14 Harley Street, though, because that proposal was ultimately considered by the SAT to comply with the objectives of the character retention area policy. So it's just important. I don't want to create an expectation in the community that this will change the system. It won't change the R codes. It won't change the approach. I think it will help ensure that there's very clear guidance and that the SAT is very clear on what the intent is and what the objectives are for the community. But I don't think it would have made a difference to the 14 Harley Street decision.
Thank you, Director. Look, I'll just make a few comments. I just wanted to say another big thank you to the Harley Street residents. If you could please pass that on to all of the neighbours, that this has been an absolute partnership approach with the Harley Street residents and the City of Vincent, and there's been so much passion and so much thought that's gone into this through this process from the residents, and I commend you on that, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you through this process, and it does demonstrate that these processes are not easy and that they are not short processes, but you've stuck with it. You've come to every council meeting. You've shown your support every step of the way. You've been very united in this approach, and it's an absolute credit to you, and it's very satisfying to be able to adopt the Harley Street to adopt Harley Street as a heritage area this evening. So it's it should be celebrated, and I hope that Christmas time is a time for celebration, so perhaps you can add this to the list of things to celebrate. So fantastic and well done. And also just to comment that in relation to Janet Street, as explained by our Manager of Policy in Place, that this is really for advertising. So we're not, while we are locking in Harley Street tonight, we're not locking in Janet Street without going back to those residents and having a very detailed conversation with them. Likewise, Carr Street is for advertising as well. So tonight we take that final step with Harley Street, and we take you know, the next step with those two streets, and we'd love to see more streets come on board and to see this policy grow and take in many more streets within the City of Vincent. But we are seeing some progress, which is fantastic. So are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. Yes, the next item that was raised in the public gallery this evening was item 9.6, which is 304 Fitzgerald Street, Perth, proposed extension of the term of approval, 4-storey office building and associated car parking. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this item, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Murphy.
Look, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation. I note the comments from Emma from Planning Solutions in relation to requesting the removal of condition 5.9, but I'm happy with that. I think that it brings the application in line with something that would be approved now, and that's part of what we would be considering in this instance. So I'm supportive of this one.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, just have a question. I'm just trying to work out what the actual impost to the developer is by having this sustainable design. Can you just run through us what the actual requirement is from them?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the requirement is for a report to be prepared detailing how the development could comply, or demonstrating how the development could comply with the targets set out in the city's policy for greenhouse gas emissions or water usage. So the applicant has some options there about what they would like to demonstrate to the city. This sets up the framework so the applicant can consider the benefits of imposing or implementing those recommendations of that report to determine, well, so they have the information they need to make an informed decision about whether to actually go ahead with that work. What we've found historically is that when applicants do that work, they actually find that there's a financial benefit for them to deliver that. When they don't do the work, they often find that they don't do it, and they often do what's required by the BCA and no more. So that's the reason for the condition. The research the city's done has shown that those kinds of reports cost between $1,500 and $3,000, depending on the scope and extent of the development. And we've started to put together some very clear guidance for developers and applicants so that they understand what the city's requiring. It's not onerous. It's just ensuring that the development has considered those issues before construction commences and it's too late.
Any further comment, Councillor Murphy?
No further comment, thank you.
Councillors, thank you. Councillors, any further comment or questions? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? I declare it carried. The third item that was raised this evening in the public gallery was item 13.2 under the Chief Executive Officer items, and that is the Annual Report 2016-17, and this is an absolute majority decision. Can I please have a mover for the Annual Report? Moved Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a point of clarification just about the formatting of it. I know that this still has to go to typesetting and design and everything. I just wanted to note that the ordering in the body of the report has swapped around corporate services and community development, but that's not changed in the table of contents. So I just want to confirm that that's not an issue if we pass it tonight.
Through you, Mayor Cole, apologies if that has occurred. There shouldn't be any reason why it has, but notwithstanding, given that that would not result in any material change to the content of the report, I believe there's sufficient scope within the recommendation that's put forward for that to be addressed.
Thank you. So I support passing the annual report as is. I'd just like to draw public attention to the inclusion of the new section on gender pay equity that's been included. I do stand to be corrected on this, but I believe it might be the first WA council that has reported on this type of metrics within our annual report. So commendation to the city for doing that. It's great that we've got this data available, and in particular, while we do have a gender pay cap within the city, it is almost half that of the national average, and it's great that 55% of senior leadership positions, so level 7 and above, are held by women within the city. I'm hopeful that that gap will continue to reduce further in coming months through potentially new appointments, along with other initiatives that have been outlined in the report. So I thank the CEO for his leadership in driving this particular forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Councillor Murphy would like to give the CEO a round of applause. Well done, CEO. Thank you. Councillor Loden, nothing to add? Any comments from any other councillors? Councillor Harley.
Given that gender equity gets a special mention, I'll just draw people's attention to the Reconciliation Action Plan, which I hope everyone reads. Again, just want to congratulate all the staff involved with the Reconciliation Plan, and looking forward to the coming year with Councillor Topperberg, Councillor Loden and myself on there, as well as some new community members.
Yes, a significant achievement. Councillor Topperberg.
Just two questions, or the one from the gallery on notice, you can take that and leave it on notice, but the one in relation to the workshop attendance, my understanding is that that's data that's not accurately available for the preceding year, but something that had been discussed internally here, and obviously there's now been a request for that from somebody publicly, but is that data that we do have available? Can we just get some comment, please, CEO?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Cole. On page 56 of the draft annual report, which is page 864 of the council meeting agenda papers, off the back of the brief discussion about that issue at the council briefing last week, we did include a paragraph that identified that due to the informality of the council workshops that has been held over the last 12 months, we hadn't consistently been keeping records of attendance. However, we will certainly commence doing that from 2018 onwards.
Thank you, CEO. Any further questions or comments? Look, I'll just add to that we are including advisory groups for the first time, and I also believe audit committee meetings. That previously we have included council meetings and briefings only, so we have extended the meeting attendance register, if you like, in the annual report. And I'd also just like to note, further to Councillor Hallett's comments, that we are pleased to be including gender equity report. It keeps us accountable and keeps our eyes sharply focused on that issue at the City of Vincent, which is very important and pleasing to see. And overall, it's a good list of things that were achieved in the year of a life of a small but very busy council. So thank you to the team for preparing the annual report, and we look forward to seeing it in its beautified version. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the annual report for adoption. All those in favour? Declare it carried. We'll now go back to the beginning of the reports and work through the remainder in order. So we have item 9.1, which is 392 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, change of use from eating house to non-medical consulting rooms, unlisted use, and this is an absolute majority decision. Councillor Gontaszewski moving, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question through you to the Director of Development Services in relation to the sort of the co-location of the two approvals in this one site. Just let me get to the plan. So if I'm looking at the plan, am I correct that the hollow barrier cabinet within the plan would that delineate the two areas that were allocated for each application, the front being the cafe and the rear being the unlisted, the massage service and foot spa area?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it would delineate the two areas. The devil will be in the detail from a health perspective, though, and there'll be a series of conditions provided on their food business approval, if they get one, to make it very clear what they can and can't do. It may be that ultimately they need to put a wall up between those two spaces. They're certainly they're not proposing to use the area as a nail salon, so they're not proposing pedicures or manicures and all of the chemicals that go along with those. They cannot be stored in the same area as the food business. So the applicant's very clear on that, and it was never their proposal, their intent to have those chemicals in that space in any case. But the devil will be in the detail regarding whether there's anything they're proposing as part of the foot spa which would be classified as chemicals which would warrant a wall. Now, that wall can be done without the need for council approval or planning approval, because the internal works are exempt from the need for development approval. So the applicant has requested to work that detail out subsequently. They've been provided with all the information under the Health Act and all the regulations, so they're aware of what they are required to do. But they are proposing to serve food in that space so that the people that are having the foot spa can have a coffee and a cake while they're having their foot spa, that's not an issue at all. It's just the food preparation area needs to be separated from the chemicals if there are any. Doesn't sound like there will be, but if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Look, I had an amendment prepared in relation to a time-limited approval, which I would like to propose, if I can get a second.
Yes, would anyone like to second the lemon? Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I think that I understand administration's comment. So my amendment is that the approval for the non-medical consulting rooms unlisted use should be for a period of 12 months only, and should the applicant wish to continue the use after that period, it should be necessary to reapply and obtain approval from the city prior to the continuation of the use. I understand that this business is associated with a permanent approved eating house. However, I have some concerns in relation to the land use in this location, and I would feel more comfortable reviewing this application again in 12 months, just to get more surety around the how the business actually is, how it's operating, and also to ensure that it is able to be managed with one consultant with 2 massage tables, 4 foot spas, and then the cafe as a separate approval in relation to the parking and also just the land use of those co-location of those 2 sites. So I'm not comfortable with going forth at this point in time with a permanent approval for these two for this unlisted use, and feel that it's appropriate to apply our standard condition in this regard.
Yes, Councillor Hallett.
So through you, Mayor Cole, to Director of Development Services, did we have any liaison with the applicant around that one person managing all of that?
That's actually a question, not a point of clarification, so I'll go to the seconder and then we'll come back to the question.
I'm not to repeat what Councillor Gontaszewski has said, but my concerns generally around what's being proposed are the matters to do with how many consultants are going to work there. There are several examples within the City of Vincent over the years I've been on council which have said one thing when they've come before us and operate completely different, and a number of those have been closed down as well because of lack of compliance. I'm not convinced about the model, happy to give it a go, but I think it needs some further review in a 12-month period.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Go ahead with your question.
I guess just following up with that, have we had any more information about the staffing?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we have had detailed conversations with the applicant around the management of the space and the use with only one consultant. They have demonstrated to us that the one consultant will be doing the massage. The foot spa area is essentially, there will be no consultant associated with the foot spa area because people will be coming in. There will be an assistant that works with the consultant that will be setting up the foot spa area. There's not any massage or treatments being done as part of that, and so they're confident that they can manage that space appropriately. But I understand the concerns that have been raised, and I think, again, the devil will be in the detail, and we'll be monitoring them throughout the next 12 months or ongoing, depending on the outcome of this.
Councillor Loden.
In the event that they are exceeding the number of consultants, what steps can the city take?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if they are clearly, and we can demonstrate that the consultant, there's more than one consultant providing beauty therapy, massage, etc., then we will undertake compliance action against them, as we ordinarily do with any breaches of planning approvals or planning or the planning scheme. So it should be quite straightforward to demonstrate that by going in and monitoring what they're doing, or going in to receive treatment and note that there are gathering evidence that they are using more than one consultant to provide treatment. It should be quite straightforward given the open nature of the site, but it's just the ordinary practice that the compliance team goes about when we receive complaints.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the development. To me, this is compliance, not planning. The planning application, I can't see anything about I mean, it's literally adjacent to a town centre. If you look at the zoning of it, they have an approval for a cafe. It's literally some space for people to put their feet into water, and whether they run it with one person, or they need 5 people and they have to come back and reapply is up to the applicant. All the other issues of compliance, I can't see any reason that we would have that would be defensible to actually restrict it. The application before us is quite clear. If the operation of the business is contrary to what has been applied for, then there's avenues open to the city to pursue that. But as far as planning is concerned, to me, it's quite clear. So I won't be supporting any limitation on it.
Councillors. Councillor Fotakis.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I've just got some questions regarding the plans that were submitted on the 7th of December, just comparing back to the plans that were submitted on the 30th of October. And there's just some changes within some of those sized areas. So I'm just wondering whether the plans that were most recently submitted are correcting some of those sizes. Like, for example, the depth of the foot spa area has increased from 5 metres to 7.5 metres. So I'm just wondering whether that came about as a process of identifying some irregularities or issues that needed correction.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, those changes were a direct result of the city identifying some errors in the previous plans, given the applicant had changed their operating model, because they reduced, the original proposal was for 2 consultants, they reduced it to 1, and there were a number of things that needed to change, including the dimensions of that space. Initially, they had a larger cafe area as well, so that reduced when they limited the numbers to 6 seats. So there were a number of changes that occurred between the original application, which the plans were provided to Council last week and this week.
Councillors. Director, perhaps if I could just follow up with a clarification. The issue here is that when they reduce the consultants or the patrons, they effectively reduce the car parking requirement and therefore the cash in lieu required. Yes. Yes. So, I mean, that's, from my perspective, that's the planning ground right there. Having visited these types of establishments to have my toenails painted on rare occasions, I do note that there's a similar one in Mount Hawthorn with 4 chairs and 2 tables for painting nails, and they have a minimum of 3 consultants working at one time. So I'm not convinced that one consultant can actually run the business as proposed, and I'm concerned that this is a an attempt to reduce car parking requirement, and therefore I do support the amendment because I'm prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt, and then we can assess in 12 months' time whether this business is actually running as the applicant states that they will be running. So I'm happy to support the amendment. Are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried with Councillor Loden and Councillor Toppelberg voting against. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put the substantive. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. Given that the remaining items were moved on block in development services, that concludes those items for this evening, and we're now moving on to corporate services 11.1, City of Vincent Code of Conduct Review. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Loden.
Thank you. Just first comment is that we're now moving to the cycle that I think we did speak about originally 2 years ago, but good to see that the idea is that the Code of Conduct will be reviewed in or around this time every second year, such that when post-elections, if there are 2, 4 or 5 or less or more new people in the room, that everybody effectively gets a chance to have their say, but also to put their hand up to acknowledge publicly and on the record that they are understand and agree and accept the Code of Conduct for the city. I think the new structure of it is vastly improved. It makes it much simpler, I think, the way it's categorised. But I will move the amendment on the green, and I did send an email around about it earlier, but just effectively it retains the principle in relation to expectations of attendance and participation and information gathering for... and actually the way that the Code of Conduct is now written, that is for elected members, employees and contractors. So it's actually essentially saying wherever you are undertaking work within the city, for the city or on its behalf, that you will attend. Yeah, sure, we'll get one of them. Why not?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Loden. Yes, great, thanks.
Excellent. So effectively where you are doing the work for the city or of the city, that you will wherever possible, make sure that you are fully informed, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to attend the required or the prescribed meetings at which matters are discussed, and then also, I assume for contractors or otherwise, where things are required of them, at least it gives us something to go back to, because otherwise, unless it's by contract, the Code of Conduct, I would imagine, is the only recourse that we would have in terms of any level of recourse. So it's a simple way of including an existing provision.
Councillor Loden. Councillors, any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. We're back to the substantive. Is there any further comment or questions on the substantive? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Item 12.1, adoption of the Parking and Parking Facilities Amendment Local Law 2017. This requires an absolute majority decision. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved Councillor Gondaszewski, seconded Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of this. This has come before us through workshopping, through before advertising and now. I'm supportive of the changes, and I'm happy that we can check off another local law as being reviewed, and so that we can keep churning through and making sure that we have a robust and up-to-date policy and regulatory environment at the city.
Councillor Murphy?
Yes, happy with the motion as put forward.
Councillors? Any further comment? Okay. Look, I just will comment that I did have some hesitancy about the removal of the 24-hour provision for parking, but I have been convinced that there are other mechanisms. I still have a slight hesitation that we might come up against something in the future and think, gee, if we had that 24-hour provision, we could have dealt with that. But on the basis of advice received, I feel that the Director has been very thorough in his examination of this matter, and happy to support it as put, because I think that 24-hour provision has its potentially could be missed, but it also does represent a problem, and I think a perception around parking that in the public domain that we do need to deal with as a council, where, as I recall, Councillor Gontaszewski raised examples of people working in mining and having complaints around their car being parked on their street, etc. So we know that that provision sometimes has been used not for the forces of good, and on that basis I'm happy to support the motion. I'll put the motion now. All those in favour? I declare it carried. The next item is 13.3, Council Recess Period 2017-18, Delegated Authority to the Chief Executive Officer, another absolute majority decision. I have a mover, please. Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Hallett.
This one seems pretty straightforward. I'm happy to support the item.
Thank you, Councillor Loden.
Nothing to add.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Just a question through you to the CEO, and I know that I'm pretty sure we've had this discussion previously, but the call-in rights is open to any individual elected member to be able to call something in. And I guess I just ask it as a question: should it not be something that we have, say, a minimum of 2 or something of that nature? I understand, or perhaps at your discretion thereafter. I guess my concern is that potentially planning applications may be unnecessarily withheld because of an individual's issue that may or may not be considered a relevant matter to the application. Are we just able to get some clarity from you? Because it doesn't happen often, but I have seen it happen where things have been delayed, therefore, by nearly a further 2 months.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Through the Chair, I'm happy to be guided by Council on that. I can assure Council members that if we received a proposal that we were looking to determine under this special delegation from Council, then we would provide sufficient details and information to Council members so that you could exercise your reasonable judgment as to whether or not that delay was actually going to be acceptable. In providing that detail, we'll be sure to explain the consequences of a call-in should that be requested or exercised. I'm personally quite comfortable with that entitlement being available to any single council member without multiples of council members needing to submit that kind of request. I'd also just add on the topic that we've taken this approach from memory, at least the 2, probably also the 3 previous Christmas or New Year shutdown periods. And in that context, last year there was no extraordinary delegation exercised under this decision of Council, and I believe that was also the case in the previous year as well. So I don't foresee that being a major risk, and as I said, I'd be happy to communicate to all Council members the consequence of any call-in should that be requested.
Councillors, any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. That concludes the items for this evening, other than 2 confidential items. So at this point, we will say farewell to the people who've been streaming at home, and Merry Christmas, and thank you for attending.